2 cherubim, one at each end of the mercy seat. And these were also made of solid gold. They were hammered into shape just like the golden lampstand was. And the mercy seat and the cherubim were all one piece of gold. The scripture gives no clear indication as to the size of the cherubim in relationship to the mercy seat itself, and or in relationship to the ark. And so you might see pictures of it with, little tiny cherubim or great big cherubim, and we just really don't know. Only that they were at each end of the mercy seat, that they faced each other as they stood guard on the ends of the mercy seat, and that they faced down, looking down towards the mercy seat. Most scholars believe that the cherubim were guardians of God's glory, and so it would be totally appropriate for them to be there where the Shekinah glory of God came and dwelt. And he said that over that mercy seat was where he would meet with Moses and with Aaron, and that's probably the reason for their workmanship in the tabernacle. Now, I mentioned I think that the cherubim were actually preventing man from entering unworthily into the presence of God, thereby protecting man from God's wrath. And it's, yes. Yes. They're angels. And if you read Ezekiel, that scripture that I gave you last week, Ezekiel, he gives a really clear description of what cherubim look like. They're one on each end of the mercy seat, which is like a lid to this Ark of the Covenant. It's called a seat, but it isn't really where anyone sits. It's called a mercy seat in that's where God met with people. But it really functionally was more like a lid to the Ark of the Covenant. So, very good question. We mentioned it earlier when we talked about the fact that there was furniture in the Ark of the Covenant, or in the Tabernacle, but there wasn't any chairs, because those priests, their work was never done. They never got to sit down. They worked constantly. But it was Jesus, when he finished the work on the cross, that he sat down at the right hand of God. And so, tradition says that, this isn't in the Bible, this is just tradition, that the high priest had to have a rope tied around his leg, so that if he went into the holiest of holies and blew it, they wouldn't have to go in after him. They could drag him out. It makes sense. Now, the Bible doesn't say that. What it does say is that he had bells on the bottom of his robe. And so that we know that as he was in there ministering and he was sprinkling blood on the mercy seat and on the Ark of the Covenant, that they could hear him moving and know he was still alive, So I guess if the bells didn't ring for a while, it's like grab the rope and start hauling him out of there. But that's just tradition. It's not scripture at all. But let's look at Exodus chapter 28. I'll learn to leave my Bible open there, huh? Exodus 28, beginning at verse 31. Talks about the robe of the ephod or ephod. I'm not sure which is the correct pronunciation. I call it ephod. Maybe that's because I'm from Arkansas and it just rolls out better. It says, "You shall make the robe of the ephod olive blue. There shall be an opening for his head in the middle of it. It shall have a woven binding all around its opening, like the opening of a coat of mail, so that it does not tear. And upon its hem you shall make pomegranates of blue and purple and scarlet yarn all around its hem, and bells of gold between them all around, a golden bell and a pomegranate, a golden bell and a pomegranate upon the hem of the robe all around. And it shall be upon Aaron when he ministers, and its sound will be heard when he goes into the holy place before the Lord, and when he comes out, that he may not die." And so I think that's where the tradition came up, that he had to have a rope also tied around him. I mean, who's going in after him? Well, maybe whoever's the next high priest, I don't know. But then he would be unclean because he touched the body, so there's all kinds of problems. Okay, yes, sir. Now, here's the thing. We talked about the cherubim being protection, And I believe it was protection for men because I don't believe that God needs protection from anything or anybody. Romans 8:31 asks if God is for us, who can be against us? There's nothing, no one that can successfully come against God. As for the Ark of the Covenant itself, if you can picture this chest-type piece of furniture in your mind's eye, it's made of wood, but you don't see the wood. All you see is the gold out exterior and interior. It must have been spectacular, beautiful piece of furniture, and not a small little box. It was a nice big chest type thing. And can you imagine if you had such a beautiful piece of furniture in your home? Even just an ornate cedar chest, not even something made of gold, but or a nice dining room set, or something that you're very good workmanship that you paid a high dollar for, and once a year someone came into your house and sprinkled blood on your beautiful furniture. Can you imagine that? And yet that's what God directed Moses to have the high priest do to this beautiful ark. Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would go behind the veil into the holiest of holies. And it was the only day that he could enter, and he was the only one who could enter. And it was such a solemn responsibility that it had to be performed exactly as the Lord had commanded that it should be performed. If the high priest didn't do exactly as he was directed, if he didn't take the blood sacrifice in with him, if he didn't sprinkle the blood on the mercy seat like he was told to do, then he would have been killed instantly. And yet we'll see when we deal with the mercy seat in more detail how blessed we are to be able to approach God, the same God as these high priests were approaching, as little children approaching their daddy, without fear, but welcome and bold. Yes? Well, God appointed Aaron as high priest, and descendants of Aaron then succeeded the position. Good question. The question was, how were the high priests chosen? Let's see. Now, the word Abba, we see it a couple of places in the Scripture, and the word Abba means father. It's an Aramaic word which corresponds to our daddy or papa. It's found actually 3 times in the New Testament. First in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus prayed in Mark 14:36, Abba, Father. Then the Apostle Paul tells us in Romans 8:14 through 16, for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And then again in Galatians 4:6, and because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of His Son into your hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. And truly what a privilege it is to be given the right to call the only true and living God Daddy, Abba, and to approach His throne with the confidence and expectation of little children who know that their daddy loves them and only wants to bless them. One thing we see in the measurements of the tabernacle is that a large number of the measurements are multiples of 5, and that was the handout that I gave you. 5 is believed to be the number of grace. There were 5,000 fed with 5 loaves. David took 5 stones from the brook when he went up against Goliath. Someone pointed out it was because Goliath had 4 brothers, but we can be sure that when we go up against the giants that we face, that we can only overcome them by the grace of God. And so Ephesians 2:8-9 says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourself. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Any questions on the... That last, that was Ephesians. Oh, Romans was a while ago. 8:14, yeah. The Abba.